Hi guys, I thought I'd turn the camera on for a moment as I walk over to the in-laws house. I've got to grab something. Regarding the streets and tunnels, the two videos that just went out, I wanted to answer some of the questions there. The streets, well, first talk about the tunnel. There was a question about the tunnel being so narrow, and was that probably a holdover from the days when foot traffic went through there? That's probably exactly the case. That tunnel was probably built at a time when there was a lot less traffic, a lot less, far fewer automobiles. For example, this neighborhood where I live right now, there's my father-in-law. I've got to give him something. Hold on just a second here. お父さんおはようございます。もうすぐ井上さんの家に。お父さん、ちょっと待ってください。これはい、あげる。ありがとうございます。これはちょっと遅い。すみません。はい。
ごちそうさま。
はい、これは何？火鉢？火鉢？この火鉢は何？
七輪。七輪。
今日の餅つき？
これでね、お魚焼くだけどね。くせえから。
はい、わかりました。またね。
はい。
Okay, so let me get back to what I was talking about. We're getting ready. The whole family is going over for an event at I think I mentioned it a couple times in past videos. We're going over for an event at everybody here knows everybody. People just driving by, say hello to everybody. His brother's house. And his brother, he comes from I'm going to talk about two subjects here real quick. My father-in-law is in Inoue. My wife is a Suzuki. He is a Suzuki, but he was born in Inoue. And the Inoues are the family that lived in this area for all these hundreds of years. Now, he was not the oldest son. He's the second son of like 6 kids. And in Japan, traditionally, the way things work is the oldest son inherits everything. The whole household, the name, everything, the whole kit and caboodle. And that was the case in their family. So when his father, when he was growing up, his brother, his older brother, the one we're going to go to the house today, inherited the family land, all the homestead, all of the land, everything, which is quite a considerable holding in this area. And now he's quite rich. Although you wouldn't know it later when we go over there to see it, he won't look very rich, but he really is. Now, my father-in-law, being not the oldest son, as was the case with all of the other siblings, they're kind of left to fend for themselves in Japan, and that's very typical in Japan, that the younger children basically, it's an advantage and a disadvantage at once. It's an advantage because they have an opportunity to basically do whatever the heck they want for the most part, but it's a disadvantage as well because they have to start from scratch. Now, in this case, one of the common solutions for this type of situation is to find a family which has daughters but no son and no male heir, and to marry the son off into that family through arranged marriage, omiai, as it's called in Japanese. And that's exactly what happened here. They knew his family, my father-in-law's family, knew a family in downtown area which had 2 daughters and no sons. The Suzuki family, they were Tataguya, shoji screen makers, and they married him off into their family. And then eventually they brought the business back over here to our neighborhood, and that's how the Suzuki's wound up here, although he is actually in Inoue. Now, they've had a rough time of it. You can see the place behind me. Their business has not prospered in an era of mass production where the handmade traditional items have faltered. So it's an interesting contrast, a tale of 2 families, so to speak. Whereas the Inoues have prospered and become quite rich, and the Suzukis have had a bit of a struggle, as had all of the other siblings in the family. They've all struggled as well. It's been a rough road for everybody. Now, back to the subject at hand, the tunnel. That tunnel was indeed built at a time when there was a lot less traffic. In fact, my father-in-law, the one that we just talked to, his family had no cars. It wasn't until Yumiko was about in junior high school, I think, that the family got their very first automobile. Other than that, they carried things around in handcarts. My father-in-law tells me lots of stories of walking all the way to Shizuoka, back and forth, or riding a bicycle. Something you can easily do now, but we do it for leisure now. Back then, he did it because that's the only way to get around. So that tunnel that we saw was built at a time when there weren't a lot of cars. Although it's not a super old tunnel, if we go up the mountain just a little farther, there's a much older tunnel and much narrower tunnel, much further up. In that narrower tunnel, there's no way that you could get 2 cars through at the same time. You'd actually have to wait until all the cars came through and then make a run through that tunnel and hope nobody else starts on the other end, because there's no way. Okay, heaven forbid you try to walk through that tunnel, and I've done it. Maybe I'll take the camera through there one day. It's quite an exciting thing to walk through that tunnel. So anyway, now back to the other point about the streets. I think, was it T-Bone? Was it Doug? Was it you who pointed out that in your area the streets will become widened when there's enough traffic? In Japan, that rarely ever happens. That's because there is nothing to widen into. The only way you could widen a street is through eminent domain and take over all the neighbors' properties and widen the street, and that rarely occurs in Japan. Now, this is kind of an exception. Do you see how this street is pretty wide here and straight? And it curves up here really nicely. It's not very wide. It's built by Japanese standards. It's still this would be a one-lane street in the States, but this is a two-lane street here. But this is a relatively new street because all of this is new. Back in the day, this house was here, and then all of this was farmland. Everywhere around here, like I mentioned in the video yesterday, dark at night, crickets, frogs in the spring, just country. This is countryside. This is all new. So the Japanese have a great... this helps to illustrate the point. This is a relatively new street. When I started dating, the first time I visited this house, this street did not exist. This was a farm here. This street was built at a time, in modern times. But it was built to this size, because that's what the Japanese expect. They do build wide streets for main thoroughfares, but for a community setting, this is just fine. So what if you need to kind of stop and maneuver one car around another? That's normal. So there you go. So to answer the question, will they widen the streets? Probably not. That's just the way it works around here. Will they make better streets when they have whole new communities that they're building? Yes, but that's very rare because everything's built over already. Well, although there are some places in the countryside that I've seen in the suburban areas where they're doing it. Well, long-winded, I only meant to turn the camera on for a moment. Here we are, 7 minutes later. I hope you all have a good morning. It should be an interesting day. We should have lots of videos coming down the pipe in just a moment. I'm going to be, another hour, we're going to head over and do the big, this is basically what Japanese people traditionally did for the holidays as a family get-together, making mochi rice, and we're going to go over and do that in just a while. So I'll sign off for now and talk to you all later. Bye-bye.